Kumba at Busch Gardens Tampa is revered as one of the best coasters from Bolliger Mabillard. It's iconic and incredibly forceful, but it also may be the most important roller coaster for the Busch Gardens chain. Find out why in this review of Kumba. When you think about roller coasters in the Busch Gardens and SeaWorld chain, what rides come to mind? Chances are it's a B&M. This has been the chain's manufacturer of choice over the past few decades when they need a big roller coaster. The B&M that started it all for the chain was Kumba. Built in 1993, this was Bolliger Mabillard's first ever sit-down roller coaster. And it would also be the company's largest roller coaster they had built yet, standing 143 feet or 44 meters tall and spanning 3,978 feet or 1,212 meters of track. It would also tie the record for the most inversions of any roller coaster with 7 upon opening. Kumba caused double-digit attendance growth for the park and has been thrilling guests for nearly 3 decades. So it's no surprise Busch Gardens and SeaWorld have returned to B&M several times since. In fact, the Williamsburg Park wanted to add a similar B&M, but because Bolliger Mabillard was so busy, Williamsburg had to go with aerodynamics for Dragonfire, which was a disaster to say the least. Needless to say, the Tampa Park is fortunate they got the B&M. While Kumba is the chain's oldest B&M, many still think it's their best coaster from them. Located in the very back of Busch Gardens Tampa, Kumba has a presence. The ride's name is a made-up African word for roar, which is fitting given how loud this coaster is. You can hear this ride even outside the park. Beyond the ride's sheer size, the teal track looks fantastic, and the yellow trains really pop against the color palette. The ride is also super well landscaped and integrated within the park. I love how sections of the ride fly over and under pathways. It really builds up excitement prior to riding. Kumba doesn't really have any theming, but I think that's fine given how the ride was thoughtfully positioned in the park. Because of how far Kumba is from the main entrance, it typically doesn't open until an hour after the rest of the park. On the bright side, Kumba usually has a pretty short wait because of this location. Most of my rides over the years have been station waits. The only exceptions have been when Kumba runs just one train in the off-season on busy weekends. On that note, definitely check the park's refurbishment calendar prior to visiting. Kumba is the coaster with the most downtime in the off-season. And that's not too surprising given its age. Kumba is one of the most cycled B&M coasters in the world. Beyond its age, the coaster operates 365 days a year in a harsh climate. The Incredible Hulk coaster was retracted just a few years ago, and Nemesis at Alton Towers is poised to receive similar track replacement in the next year. These two B&Ms were among the most cycled from the company, and Kumba is probably one of the other top ones. I would not be surprised if Kumba is due for a similar treatment, and I hope the park is willing to spend that on one of their headlining attractions to preserve it for many decades to come, because it's still a crowd pleaser. When Kumba runs 2 trains, this coaster's line flies. Each train seats up to 32 riders across 8 rows, and dispatches are usually pretty swift on this coaster. Unlike the newer B&M sit-down coasters that feature floorless trains, Kumba's trains have floors. While I do prefer the more open vehicles of the floorless coasters from a visual standpoint, these trains are equally as comfortable. You have the familiar over-the-shoulder restraints. These are hard, but thankfully Kumba is still pretty darn smooth after all these years. The worst part about these trains is how little arm space you have with the adjacent rider, but that's just a minor nuisance. Kumba has an extended queue line for the front, and usually takes several extra trains to board that row. But my favorite row anyway is the back. That has the most forceful seat on Kumba. Once dispatched, you slightly turn out of the station and ascend the lift hill. You don't get the best view because the lift is positioned away from the park and Tampa's skyline. Instead, you're looking out into the nearby neighborhood. Once at the top, you navigate a quick pre-drop, and then you twist 135 feet or 41 meters back down to the ground, reaching your top speed of 60 miles per hour or 97 kilometers per hour. I love many things about Kumba, but this drop is admittedly underwhelming. It just doesn't have much force or power to it. More or less, it just gets you up to speed. Now the fun begins with the massive vertical loop. This was the first time B&M had one of these elements wrap around the lift hill, which is a neat visual both on and off ride. But more importantly, this inversion is very powerful. Strong positive G's are sustained all the way through the element, and I typically gray out here. is the most powerful loop on any B&M. That is followed by an excellent dive loop. You get a faint pop of inverted airtime in the back rows, and then you're yanked back down to the ground, experiencing some crushing positive G's on the way down. Just after I regained my vision from the vertical loop, I typically start to get fuzzy here as well. Then comes the best element on Kumba, the 0G roll. I've heard some coin this element the hell roll, and I can see why. This inversion is violent in the best way possible. It's extremely snappy, and it rapidly rotates you 360 degrees. And that motion is even crazier because you're levitating out of your seat as the train pulls you through it. I think the weightlessness is slightly better up front, but the back gets more whip and lateral forces to compensate. Kumba then hurdles over this little speed hill. It's pretty elongated, but it can still give a little pop of airtime as a contrast from the positive G's. It catches you by surprise. You then get pinned to your seat for B&M's first ever Cobra roll. While I do find this element forgettable on a lot of their newer coasters, Kumba's is very snappy, and I started to gray out slightly again from the positive G's ascending and descending the element. Kumba then rises up into the mid-course, giving a reprieve from the blitz of forces. You're likely going to be trimmed here, but the second half still packs a punch even when slowed down. The drop off the brake run is pretty forgettable, but the interlocking corkscrews are anything but. These two corkscrews are very picturesque, and they have some great snap to them, particularly in the back rows. They're whippier than B&M's newer corkscrews, that's for sure. I do want to note that the entry into the first one can cause some headbanging, but that's really the only rough patch on the ride from my experience. You then navigate this banked hill that dives into a tunnel. It doesn't look like much, but the drop pulls you downwards if you're in the back. When you emerge from the tunnel, you navigate this upwards helix that hugs the terrain. The helix doesn't feel all that fast, but it still delivers really good positive G's. You then hit the brake run, ending this forceful classic. Kumba has to be one of the best paced B&Ms. Outside the mild drops and reprieve in the mid-course, Kumba is incredible. There are no throwaway elements or turnarounds here. All 7 inversions deliver incredible positive G's and or snap. And I wish the later B&Ms could match the intensity of Kumba. This ride has an impressive sense of speed, particularly in that first half because you're zooming alongside trees and pathways. And as I mentioned, this ride is still very smooth. It does have a little shimmy at points, but you're not really going to hit your head much. So what would I rate Kumba? I would give the original B&M sit-down looper a 9 out of 10. This ride is a powerhouse. Between the coaster's strength and pacing, it's about as good as a pure looping coaster can be. This ride is one of the best rides on the planet for positive G's and snappy inversions. It doesn't have too much variety, but it doesn't need it. Beyond the force, the ride also has that nice location, and it offers a smooth experience still after all these years. Although I prefer Montu in the same park, Kumba is still one of the best looping coasters from B&M, and it's a ride I always look forward to experiencing whenever I visit Busch Gardens Tampa. So those are my thoughts on Kumba at Busch Gardens Tampa. What are your thoughts on this looping coaster? Do you prefer this one or Montu? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I'd appreciate it if you gave this video a like, and you considered subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.